A socialite visiting the mansion mocked the black maid until the Mafia boss ordered her out without one more word. Lisa Thompson had always prided herself on her ability to blend into the background. As a maid in one of the wealthiest homes in the city, she knew her place. She was quiet, efficient, and always careful not to draw attention to herself. Today, however, was different. Today, a socialite, a woman who looked as though she had just stepped out of a magazine, had decided to make Lisa the target of her sharp, condescending remarks. A maid, really? You must have been desperate for a job, the woman sneered as Lisa carefully set the silverware on the dining table. Lisa's heart sank, but she kept her head down, knowing better than to engage. The woman continued, her voice dripping with disdain. I'm sure you don't even know how to eat properly, do you? Lisa clenched her fists but remained silent. She wasn't going to let this woman's words break her. But the humiliation was real. With each word, she could feel the heat rise in her cheeks, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she moved around the room, making sure not to make a sound. The socialite was enjoying herself, clearly basking in her sense of superiority, and Lisa felt every word like a slap to the face. Just as she began to feel overwhelmed by the sting of the insults, the door opened with a soft creak. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. It was John Castellano, the Mafia boss, the man who controlled not only the mansion but the entire neighborhood. He stepped into the room with an aura of authority, his dark eyes scanning the situation. He saw everything. Saw the way the socialite was mocking Lisa, saw the way Lisa was struggling to keep her composure. Without a word, he walked toward the socialite, his presence commanding the room, his silence more powerful than any words could be. He stood beside the socialite for a moment, his gaze cold and unflinching. Then, without any warning, he spoke, his voice low but firm. Leave. Now. The words hung in the air, and the socialite froze. She didn't move, too stunned to react at first. She had expected to be treated with deference, not dismissed like this. But John's gaze never wavered, and his tone left no room for argument. After a long, tense moment, the socialite stood, her face flushed with anger and humiliation, but she knew better than to defy him. She turned on her heel and left the room without another word. Lisa stood frozen in place, her heart racing. She couldn't believe what had just happened. John, the man who could make or break anyone in this city, had stepped in and defended her, a simple maid. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lisa felt a small spark of hope. It wasn't just the fact that John had intervened. It was the way he had done it, with such certainty, as if her dignity was something worth protecting. It was a feeling she wasn't used to, but it was one she would never forget. John turned to Lisa, his eyes softening for just a moment. Are you okay? He asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Lisa nodded, still in shock, but a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. I'm fine, sir. Thank you. It wasn't just the fact that he had stood up for her. It was the unspoken understanding, the quiet acknowledgement that Lisa was worth something more than just the mockery she had endured. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. The room was silent after the socialite left, but the air still felt thick with tension. Lisa Thompson stood there for what felt like an eternity, her hands still trembling ever so slightly. She couldn't believe what had just happened. For the first time in her life, she felt like someone had actually seen her, truly seen her, and stood up for her when no one else ever would. John Castellano, the Mafia boss, had dismissed the socialite with nothing more than a cold, commanding word. It was a gesture so simple, yet so powerful that Lisa couldn't quite wrap her mind around it. She had always kept her head down, working tirelessly in silence, never expecting anything more than the bare minimum respect. Yet, here she was, standing in the presence of a man who had the power to change her world, and he had done just that. The stillness of the room was broken by John's voice, low and calm. Are you all right? Lisa looked up at him, her eyes wide in shock. She had never expected anyone, especially him, to ask. She had always been invisible, a shadow in the background. I'm fine, sir, she replied, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Thank you. John nodded, his eyes studying her for a moment longer before he turned away, his footsteps echoing across the room as he walked toward the grand fireplace. He was the embodiment of control, the very definition of power, yet there was something different about the way he had interacted with her. It wasn't just about protecting her from the socialite. It was something deeper. It was as if he had recognized her worth, seen past the uniform, the status, the job title. He had recognized her as a person, and that was something Lisa had never experienced before. As he turned back to face her, there was a brief moment of silence between them, the kind of silence that felt like a question lingering in the air, one that neither of them had the answer to. "You don't have to thank me," John said finally, his tone softer than before. "It's the least I could do." Lisa nodded again, unsure of what to say. She had never been one for confrontation or speaking up for herself, but something about the way John had spoken to her made her feel different. For the first time, she felt like her voice mattered. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just invisible. "I appreciate it, sir," Lisa managed to say, still unsure of what to make of the situation. John's gaze softened for a moment before he gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. "You're welcome." Then, he turned away, walking toward the door. "Get some rest, Lisa," he added, his voice calm but firm. "You've earned it." Lisa stood there, frozen for a moment as the weight of his words sank in. Earned it? She had always worked hard, done her best, but no one had ever told her that she had earned something. No one had ever acknowledged her efforts in such a way. It felt like a dream. As John opened the door and stepped out, leaving Lisa standing alone in the room, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope flicker inside her, a hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Maybe she could be different. As the days went on, Lisa found herself thinking more and more about that moment. John's words, his actions, they had all left an impression on her. She had always been resigned to her place in life, always believed that people like her had no real power or worth. But now, after that brief encounter, she couldn't shake the feeling that she might be wrong. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to her than just being a maid. And as she worked alongside John in the mansion, she began to notice things she hadn't before, how he interacted with people, how he treated those around him. There was something about him that was different from the others. Despite his reputation, despite his power, there was a kindness, a quiet strength in the way he moved through the world. It was subtle, but it was there. And it made Lisa wonder, what if she didn't have to stay in the background forever? What if she could stand up for herself? What if she could actually make a difference in her own life? The next time she saw John, she would speak up. She wasn't sure how, or even what she would say, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to stay invisible any longer. Days passed since the incident with the socialite, and Lisa Thompson found herself in a place she never expected to be. There was a shift in the mansion, a subtle change that she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the fact that John Castellano had defended her, or that she now felt more seen than ever before. It was something deeper, something that was beginning to change her from within. Lisa had spent her life in the shadows, never asking for much, never expecting anything beyond the daily grind of her work. But now, after the way John had spoken to her, there was a spark of something new inside her, a quiet voice telling her that maybe, just maybe, she could ask for more. She could be more. Each day, she went about her tasks with a newfound sense of purpose. She no longer felt like just a maid. She felt like she was someone worthy of respect. It wasn't a grand change, but it was enough to make her stand a little taller, to walk with a little more confidence. It was on a warm afternoon, as she was polishing the grand piano in the corner of the ballroom, that she found herself face to face with John again. He was standing by the large windows, his silhouette framed by the golden light streaming in from outside. She had seen him many times before, but today felt different. There was a stillness in the room, an unspoken tension that hung between them. As he turned to look at her, his eyes softened, as if noticing something in her that he hadn't before. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she wasn't just the maid. She was someone who mattered. "Lisa," John said, his voice calm but with a hint of something else. "I've noticed something different about you lately." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure how to respond. Was it that obvious? Had he seen through the small changes inside her? "It's nothing, sir," she replied, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. John gave her a small smile, one that seemed to carry a warmth that she hadn't expected from someone like him. "No, it's not nothing," he said, stepping closer. "You've been carrying yourself with more confidence. I like it." Lisa felt her cheeks flush at the unexpected compliment. "Thank you," she managed to say, still unsure of how to handle the situation. John studied her for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. You're a hard worker, Lisa. You always have been. But I think you have more to offer than just cleaning up after people. His words struck her like a bolt of lightning. She had always kept her head down, always stayed in her place. But now, here was this man. The man who had the power to change everything, telling her that she had more to offer. It was a strange feeling, one that she wasn't sure how to process. What do you mean, sir? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. John paused for a moment before answering, his expression serious. I mean that I've seen something in you. A strength, a kind of resilience that's rare. People like you, people who serve others, often forget their own worth. But I see it in you. Lisa didn't know how to respond to that. She had never thought of herself as strong, never believed that she had any kind of resilience. She had always been just a maid, doing her job, staying invisible. But John's words made her question everything. Maybe she had been wrong all along. Maybe she wasn't just the invisible servant. Maybe she was someone who could stand tall and be proud of who she was. John stepped back, his gaze never leaving hers. You deserve more, Lisa. Don't ever forget that. The words lingered in the air long after he had left the room. Lisa stood there, frozen, as the weight of what he had said began to sink in. She didn't know where this newfound sense of self-worth would take her, but she knew one thing for sure. Things were never going to be the same. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who could demand respect. She was someone who could ask for more. And for the first time in her life, that thought didn't scare her. It excited her. As the days went by, Lisa started to realize that her feelings for John were changing. It wasn't just about the respect he had shown her. It was more than that. It was the way he made her feel seen. The way he made her believe that she was worthy of more than just being invisible. She had never allowed herself to imagine a different life, a life where she could be more than just the maid. But now, as she stood in the mansion's grand hall, she found herself wondering what it would be like to have more, to be more. It was a dangerous thought, one that made her heart race. But it was also a hopeful thought, one that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could have a future beyond these walls. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back any longer. The days following the conversation with John Castellano were unlike any Lisa Thompson had ever experienced. There was a new sense of purpose in her every step, a quiet confidence she had never known before. The mansion seemed different now, not just a place of work, but a space where she could start to see herself as someone more than just the help. Every time she passed John in the hallways, she noticed the small, respectful nod he gave her, a gesture that made her feel like she truly mattered in this world that had once made her feel so invisible. But as much as the newfound respect from John had filled her with hope, there was a part of Lisa that still felt uncertain, still afraid to let go of the life she had always known. She had been a maid for so long, a servant in the background, never really a part of the world around her. Could she really change? Could she step out of the shadows and into a life where she wasn't just working, but living, truly living? It was a question that she asked herself every day as she went about her work in the mansion. She worked harder than ever, but now, it wasn't just about doing the job. There was a deeper motivation. She found herself taking pride in her work, finding small moments of joy in the simple acts of cleaning and organizing. She knew that she was capable of more, but it wasn't easy to let go of the fear that had held her back for so long. One evening, as she was finishing up in the kitchen, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see John walking toward her, his expression as unreadable as ever. For a moment, Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She had grown accustomed to seeing him from afar, but this time, he was approaching her directly. "Lisa," he said, his voice calm, but there was a hint of something more, something that made her pulse quicken. "I need to talk to you." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what this conversation would bring, but she knew it would be important. She nodded, setting down the dish she was drying. "Of course, sir." John motioned for her to follow him into the adjoining room. The dim light from the chandelier cast soft shadows on the walls as they walked into the space, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Once they were alone, John turned to face her, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to gauge her reaction to whatever he was about to say. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady. "You've been with us for a long time, Lisa. I've seen how hard you work. I've seen your dedication. Lisa's chest tightened, unsure of where this was going. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I think it's time you started thinking about more than just your job here," John continued, his words measured and deliberate. "You deserve a chance to do something for yourself, to go after what you want." Lisa blinked, surprised by the weight of his words. What was he saying? Did he think she could leave the mansion, leave this life behind? "I'm not asking you to leave, not at all," John said, sensing her confusion. "But I want you to know that you don't have to stay here forever. You have the potential for more, and I'm willing to help you take that first step." Lisa's heart raced. Could this really be happening? Had she been so focused on the mundane details of her life that she had missed the bigger picture? John was offering her a chance to leave the life she had always known and step into something new, something unknown. "What do you mean, sir?" she asked, her voice shaky with emotion. John studied her for a moment before responding. "I've arranged for you to have the opportunity to further your education," he said, his words slow but steady. "I know you've always been smart, Lisa. You've got a lot more to offer than just cleaning these halls. I've set up a scholarship for you, and I want you to take it. I want you to have the chance to make something of yourself, outside of this mansion, outside of this life." Lisa stood there in stunned silence. The idea of going to school, of learning something new, seemed impossible, a dream she had never allowed herself to entertain. But here John was, making that dream a reality. She could hardly believe it. "You deserve this," he continued, his gaze softening. "You've worked hard, and it's time for you to do something for yourself. I believe in you, Lisa." She could feel the tears threatening to spill as his words washed over her. She had never imagined that someone, let alone someone like John, would believe in her. In that moment, she realized that her life was about to change forever. No longer would she be just the maid, the invisible servant who only existed to clean and serve. She could be more. She could be someone who mattered, someone who had the chance to create her own future. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. John smiled, a small but genuine smile that made something inside her flutter. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Now, it's up to you to take the next step." As Lisa walked back to the staff quarters that night, she couldn't help but feel a new sense of purpose inside her. The path ahead wasn't clear, and the road would be difficult, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was ready to take control of her own destiny. No longer would she hide in the shadows, afraid to dream. She was going to step into the light and take that first step toward a future that was all her own. Lisa Thompson stood in front of the full-length mirror in the staff quarters, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who had entered this mansion all those years ago. She no longer looked like the quiet, invisible maid who moved in the shadows. There was a spark in her eyes now, a new sense of purpose. For the first time, she saw the possibility of something more. John's words still echoed in her mind. "You deserve more." It had been 2 weeks since he had offered her the scholarship, and every day since then, she had felt the weight of the decision ahead of her. She had always been afraid of change, afraid of stepping into the unknown. But now, with the opportunity to pursue something greater than she ever imagined, the fear was fading, replaced by an excitement she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about the education. It was about the chance to finally take control of her own life. For the first time, Lisa was beginning to believe in herself. She was no longer just the maid. She was a woman with options. But as she prepared to take the next step, she knew there were obstacles ahead. This wasn't going to be easy. The mansion had been her home for so long, and stepping away from it felt like stepping away from everything she knew. Her friends, the people she worked alongside every day, they would all wonder what had happened to her. They had always seen her as the quiet one, the one who never asked for more. But now, she was different. She couldn't keep hiding behind the walls she had built. She had to be brave. After her shift, she found herself in the grand dining room, standing in front of the table where she had worked countless times before, the place where she had always served, always stayed out of sight. But today, as she carefully set the silverware in place, she couldn't help but feel different. There was a new kind of confidence in the way she moved, in the way she held herself. She wasn't the invisible servant anymore. As she finished, she turned to leave the room. But there, standing at the doorway, was John Castellano. Lisa's heart skipped a beat, and she felt a flutter of nerves. She hadn't expected to see him here, not now, not after everything that had happened. He studied her for a moment, his eyes soft but intense, and for the first time, Lisa saw something in him. Something that wasn't just about authority or control. There was a kindness in his gaze, a recognition that spoke volumes. "Lisa," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge of something else. "I'm glad to see you're still here." Lisa smiled, surprised by his words. "Of course, sir," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's where I belong." John's gaze lingered on her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Is it really where you belong?" he asked, his words cutting through the air. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John stepped closer, his presence commanding but not intimidating. "You're more than this place, Lisa," he said softly. "You're more than just a maid. You're someone with potential, someone who can do something with her life." Lisa felt her heart race as his words sunk in. For so long, she had kept herself small, convinced that this was the only life she could have. But now, with John's encouragement, she began to wonder if there was more waiting for her. She didn't have to stay in this world of shadows. She could step into the light. "You have a chance now," John continued. "A real chance. Don't let fear hold you back." Lisa looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. She had always admired John's strength, his confidence. But it was in this moment that she saw him for who he truly was, a man who believed in people, who wanted to see them succeed. "I don't know if I can do this," Lisa admitted, her voice shaking. "Slightly. I've never been the type to ask for more. I've always just accepted things the way they are." John smiled, his eyes warm. "That's the first step, Lisa," he said. "You've already taken it. You've accepted that you deserve more. And now, it's time to go after it." His words gave her the courage she needed. She wasn't going to be afraid anymore. She wasn't going to hide. Lisa nodded, determination filling her heart. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady now. "I'm ready to take that step." As she walked out of the grand dining room, her mind raced with the possibilities ahead. The road would be difficult, but Lisa was no longer the woman who had walked in here all those years ago. She was someone with dreams, someone who could fight for her future. And for the first time, she believed that anything was possible. Lisa stood at the threshold of the mansion's grand front door, her hand resting lightly on the handle. For a moment, she just stared outside, her heart pounding in her chest. The world beyond the mansion was wide and uncertain, full of possibilities that both excited and terrified her. This was it, the first step into a future she had never dared to dream of before. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She had made the decision. She was leaving the mansion, leaving the life she had known for so long, and stepping into something new. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, but she couldn't stay hidden in the shadows anymore. She deserved more. She deserved a chance to build her own life, to prove to herself that she could do something greater than just cleaning and serving. As she walked out of the door and into the evening air, Lisa couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. The city stretched before her, the streets alive with people, the sounds of life in full swing. It was everything she had ever imagined: freedom, possibility, and the chance to start over. But as she made her way down the path, her thoughts turned to John Castellano. He had been the one to show her a way forward, the one who had believed in her when no one else had. He had given her the courage to take this step. And now, as she walked away from the mansion, she felt a deep sense of gratitude toward him. He had seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she wouldn't have gotten here without him. Lisa's steps were light but determined as she made her way to the bus stop. The weight of her decision still settled on her shoulders, but there was a new sense of confidence in her stride. For the first time in her life, she was doing something for herself. The ride to the city was quiet, the familiar hum of the bus lulling her into a sense of calm. When she finally arrived at her destination, she stepped off the bus and into the bustling streets. The city felt different now, like it was hers to explore, hers to navigate. She had no set plan, no clear direction, but that didn't matter. She was free. Lisa wandered through the city, taking in the sights and sounds. She felt alive in a way she never had before. It was as though everything she had been told about herself, about who she was, about where she belonged, was now irrelevant. She was starting fresh. The evening sun was dipping below the horizon when she found herself standing in front of a small cafe. It wasn't fancy, but there was something welcoming about it, something that made her feel like this was where she needed to be. She hesitated for only a moment before walking inside. The warm light of the cafe greeted her like an old friend, and the hum of quiet conversation made her feel strangely at home. The barista behind the counter smiled at her as she approached. "What can I get for you?" the barista asked, her voice friendly. Lisa paused for a moment, taking in the menu. She had never been much of a coffee drinker, but tonight felt different. "A latte, please," she said, surprising even herself. The barista nodded, preparing the drink with practiced ease. As Lisa waited, she scanned the room, her eyes falling on a table near the window. It was a small table, but it was just enough for one person, and it felt like the perfect place to sit and think. As she sipped her latte, Lisa's thoughts drifted to her future. She had made the decision to leave the mansion, to step away from everything she had known. But what now? What did the future hold for her? She had no clear answers, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was in control of her own destiny. She had taken the first step, and that was enough for now. As she finished her drink and prepared to leave, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from John. Asterisk, "I hope you're doing well. Just wanted to remind you that you're capable of anything. Don't forget that." Asterisk. Lisa smiled to herself as she read the message. It was a simple note, but it meant the world to her. She had always doubted herself, always held back because she didn't think she was worthy of more. But now, thanks to John, she was beginning to believe in herself. She didn't need anyone to tell her what she could do anymore. She knew she was capable of so much more. Lisa stepped out of the cafe, the cool evening air wrapping around her like a protective embrace. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready for it. With each step, she felt a little more like the person she was meant to be. She wasn't the maid anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was someone with a future, someone with dreams. And she wasn't going to stop until she made those dreams come true. Lisa woke up to a bright, cool morning, the sunlight streaming through the window and casting warm rays across her room. It was a new day, a new beginning, and for the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her decision lift from her shoulders. She had made the choice to leave behind the life she knew and step into something uncertain, something bigger. She had never imagined herself leaving the mansion, never thought she could break free from the life of servitude she had always known. But now, as she sat on the edge of her bed, taking in the quiet of her new apartment, she knew that she had taken the right step. She had left the shadows behind, and for the first time, she was living for herself. The air outside was crisp as Lisa walked down the street, taking in the sights and sounds of the city. The bustling streets, the cars rushing by, the people hurrying to and fro. It was all so new, so different from the quiet isolation of the mansion. She had always been part of the background, always worked behind the scenes. But now, she was part of the world, part of something bigger. The world was hers to explore. As she walked through the city, she noticed the little things, the way the sun sparkled off the glass buildings, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting from the corner cafe, the sounds of laughter and conversations spilling from the nearby park. The city was alive, and Lisa was finally a part of it. She had always dreamed of this, dreamed of stepping outside the confines of her world and experiencing life. And now, she was living that dream. But as she wandered through the city, there was still a part of her that felt uncertain. She had taken the first step, but what came next? What would her life look like now? The questions swirled in her mind, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back. She was going to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Later that afternoon, as Lisa sat in a small cafe, sipping her coffee and watching the world go by, she received a message on her phone. It was from John. "I hope you're doing well," it read. "I just wanted to remind you that you're capable of anything. Don't forget that." Lisa smiled to herself as she read the message. It was a simple note, but it carried a weight of meaning that made her heart swell. John had always believed in her, had always seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. His words had given her the strength to leave the mansion, to step out into the unknown. And now, as she sat there, she realized that she was ready. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready to embrace the future. The next few weeks were a blur of new experiences. Lisa enrolled in the local community college, her heart racing with excitement and nervousness as she sat in her first class. She had never imagined herself as a student, had never thought she was smart enough to be anything more than a maid. But now, with each passing day, she was proving to herself that she was more than just what she had been told she was. She was capable. She was worthy. Lisa still worked part-time at a cafe to make ends meet, but her new life was starting to take shape. She spent her evenings studying, her mind hungry for knowledge, her heart determined to make something of herself. The more she learned, the more she realized how much she had been holding back, how much potential had been waiting inside her all along. And with each new day, she felt a little more confident, a little more sure of who she was becoming. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when she wondered if she had made the right choice, if the future would be as bright as she had imagined. But then she thought back to John's words, to the encouragement he had given her, and the doubts melted away. She was doing this for herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. One evening, after a long day of studying and work, Lisa found herself sitting on a park bench, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, the colors reflecting off the lake in the distance. It was a peaceful moment, and for the first time in a long time, Lisa felt truly content. She had made it. She had stepped into the world she had always dreamed of, and although the road ahead was still uncertain, she knew that she was on the right path. She was no longer the invisible maid in the mansion. She was Lisa Thompson, a woman with dreams, with a future, with the courage to chase after it. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, she smiled to herself, knowing that this was just the beginning of the life she was going to create. The morning sun filtered softly through the blinds, casting gentle shadows across the room. Lisa Thompson woke up to the sound of the city coming to life outside her window, the distant hum of traffic and the occasional laugh from a passerby on the street below. It had been months since she left the mansion, since she made the decision to step into the unknown, and every day since then had been a revelation. She had moved from the small apartment she had first rented to something bigger, something that felt like a real home. Her classes at the community college were going well, and although it wasn't always easy, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. Lisa stood and stretched, the familiar morning routine now a source of comfort. She had grown accustomed to this new life, to being her own person, to defining herself by what she wanted to achieve, not by what others expected of her. It was liberating, in a way. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a student. She was someone with goals, someone who believed she could create her own future. After a quick breakfast, Lisa headed out the door, her backpack slung over one shoulder. It was a beautiful day, the kind that made everything feel possible. She made her way to the bus stop, enjoying the quiet moments before the rush of the day began. As she waited, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw that it was a message from John. She hadn't heard from him in a while. "I hope you're doing well. Just wanted to check in and remind you that you're capable of achieving great things. Keep pushing forward, Lisa." A smile tugged at her lips as she read the message. It was simple, but it meant more than she could say. John had been the one to show her that she could be more, that she could do more. His belief in her had been the spark that ignited her desire for something greater. He had given her the courage to leave behind the life she had known, and for that, she would be forever grateful. Lisa quickly typed a reply. "Thank you, John. Your words always come at the right time. I'm doing well, and I'm pushing forward, just like you said." She sent the message and slid her phone back into her pocket. The bus arrived, and she boarded, settling into her seat. As the bus made its way through the city, Lisa's mind wandered. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had changed since that day in the mansion. She had never imagined a life like this, one where she wasn't invisible, where she wasn't defined by the job she did, but by the person she was becoming. Her thoughts were interrupted when the bus came to a stop. She stood up and made her way to the door, stepping out into the bustling streets of the city. Her class was just a few blocks away, and as she walked, she couldn't help but notice how alive everything felt. The city, with all its noise and energy, felt like it was full of endless possibilities. Lisa felt like she was finally part of it. She arrived at school with a few minutes to spare, so she found a quiet corner to sit and review her notes. She had been working hard, balancing her part-time job at the cafe and her classes, but it was all starting to come together. She was learning, growing, and building a future she had once thought was impossible. As she sat there, her thoughts shifted again, this time to her future. What would it look like? Where would she go from here? The possibilities seemed endless, and for the first time in her life, Lisa felt ready to embrace them all. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let anything stop her. The bell rang, signaling the start of class. Lisa stood and made her way into the classroom, feeling a sense of excitement wash over her. She had worked hard to get here, and she was determined to make the most of it. As she sat down in her seat and prepared for the lecture, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life she had now, and for the person she was becoming. She had come a long way from the quiet, invisible maid who had once walked the halls of the mansion. She had found her voice, her purpose, and she was ready to take on whatever came next. Lisa stepped into the small cafe where she worked part-time, her mind still buzzing from the lecture she had just attended. The world outside felt alive and full of opportunity, but she knew the challenges were just beginning. It had been several months since she left the mansion and began her new life, and while there were moments of triumph, there were also moments of doubt. She had worked tirelessly to balance school, her job, and the desire to build a new future, but there were days when it felt overwhelming. She shook off the lingering thoughts and walked behind the counter, putting on her apron as she greeted the familiar faces of the regular customers. The cafe had become her second home, a place where she could focus on the present instead of constantly worrying about what the future might hold. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job that paid the bills and kept her grounded. As she wiped down the counter, her thoughts drifted to the message she had received from John earlier that week. "Don't forget what you're capable of," he had written. "I'm proud of you, Lisa." His words had meant more than she could express. John had been her guiding light, the person who had helped her see her own potential. It was because of him that she had left the life she knew and dared to dream of something bigger. His belief in her had given her the courage to push through the tough days, the days when she questioned if she was strong enough to continue. But now, as she stood behind the counter, she realized just how far she had come. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into the mansion years ago, unsure of herself and invisible to the world. She had grown, not just in knowledge, but in confidence. The bell above the cafe door jingled as a new customer walked in. Lisa turned, offering a warm smile. "Welcome. What can I get for you today?" The man at the counter smiled back, his eyes bright. "Just a black coffee, please," he said. Lisa quickly prepared his order, her movements efficient and practiced. As she handed him his coffee, he looked at her with curiosity. "You look familiar," he said. Lisa raised an eyebrow, a little confused. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met," she replied politely. The man chuckled. "I could have sworn I've seen you before. You used to work at the Castellano estate, right?" Lisa froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't thought about the mansion in weeks, and the mention of it brought back a flood of memories. She smiled politely, though there was a hint of hesitation in her voice. "Yes, I used to work there." I thought so," the man said. "I was a guest there a few times. You were always so quiet, so professional. It's good to see you. Out in the world, doing your own thing now." Lisa nodded, grateful for his kind words, but still a little uneasy. "Thank you," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "It's a new chapter for me." The man smiled warmly and left the cafe, and Lisa exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It wasn't the first time someone had recognized her from her days at the mansion, but it was always a little jarring. She had left that life behind, but sometimes it felt like it was still lingering just beneath the surface, waiting to remind her of where she had come from. But today, as she stood in the cafe, Lisa realized that she didn't need to be defined by her past. She was building something new, something for herself. And while she would always carry the lessons of her past with her, they no longer had control over her. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and coffee orders, but as Lisa closed the cafe that evening, she felt a sense of pride in the work she had done. She had been working hard, not just at her job but at her life, and each day felt like a small victory. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Lisa had learned something important. She was capable of more than she had ever believed. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. That night, after a quiet dinner in her apartment, Lisa sat down at her desk, ready to study for the upcoming exams. As she opened her textbooks, she thought about the future. The path was still unclear, but for the first time, She felt like she could walk it with her head held high. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was living her life on her terms. And no matter where that path led, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. Lisa woke up to a soft morning light filtering through the curtains of her new apartment. It was a feeling she had grown accustomed to over the past few months, waking up in a space that was hers, no longer a transient place, no longer a temporary home. She had worked hard to make this life her own, and each day brought a sense of accomplishment she hadn't known before. Her journey had been anything but easy, but she was proud of where she was now. As she stood up and stretched, her eyes glanced around the room. The bookshelves were filled with textbooks and novels. A small desk in the corner was scattered with papers from her latest assignment, and the kitchen, though modest, felt like a luxury compared to the small space she had started in. This apartment was a reflection of her growth, of the steps she had taken to build a future for herself. And yet, there were still moments when the weight of it all felt overwhelming. Lisa wasn't used to making decisions for herself, at least not the kind that shaped the future. Her time at the mansion had been a period of routine, where every day blended into the next. Now, each choice, each step forward, felt monumental. She had to decide what she wanted out of life, where she wanted to go, and how she was going to get there. It was a lot to carry, and on the toughest days, the fear of failure crept in. Would she succeed? Could she make it on her own? These questions always lingered in the back of her mind. But today was different. Today, she was determined to keep moving forward. She had learned from her past, from the struggles she had overcome, and she knew that no matter what, she would not go back to the life she had once known. After a quick breakfast, Lisa grabbed her bag and headed out the door, ready for another day of classes. The walk to the bus stop was familiar now, a comforting part of her routine. As she waited for the bus, she noticed the energy around her, the people rushing to work, the distant sound of a street musician playing a tune on his guitar. It was all so vibrant, so full of life. Lisa had never noticed how much she had missed it until she had the freedom to experience it fully. The bus arrived, and Lisa found her usual seat by the window. As the city passed by, her thoughts shifted to the future again. Her courses were going well. She was learning more than she had ever expected to, and each lecture added a new layer to the person she was becoming. She was no longer just a maid. She was a student, a woman with goals and ambitions. But, even as she felt proud of her progress, she also wondered where it would all lead. She had so many possibilities in front of her, but the uncertainty still lingered. Would she continue her studies after this semester? Should she try to get a job in her field, or would she need to take time to figure out where exactly she belonged in the world? These were the questions that kept her awake some nights. But for now, she focused on what she could control: her education, her growth, and her determination. After a busy morning of classes, Lisa found herself back at the cafe in the afternoon, serving coffee and chatting with customers. The work was familiar, and she found comfort in the routine. But today, something felt different. She had been reflecting on how much had changed since the day she had made the decision to leave the mansion. The fear, the uncertainty, those feelings had started to fade. She was doing it. She was building the life she had once only dreamed of. As she handed a customer their coffee, she was interrupted by a voice from behind the counter. "Lisa, can I talk to you for a moment?" It was her manager, Sarah, someone who had become a quiet supporter over the months. Sarah was always kind and encouraging, and Lisa had always felt comfortable around her. "Of course," Lisa replied, setting down the coffee pot. Sarah motioned for her to come to the back. Once they were out of earshot, Sarah spoke. "I've been meaning to tell you something," she said, her voice warm but serious. "I've noticed how hard you've been working and how much you've grown. I think you're ready for more responsibility here." Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what Sarah meant, but the excitement and possibility in her voice made her want to hear more. "What do you mean?" she asked. Sarah smiled. "I mean that I'd like to offer you a management position. I think you'd do great in it, and it's a big step forward for you." Lisa stood still for a moment, her mind racing. A management position? She had never even considered something like that. But then again, why not? She had proven to herself that she was capable of more than just being a barista. She had learned so much in the time she had worked at the cafe, and she was ready for a challenge. "I'm honored, Sarah," Lisa said, her voice steady. "I'd love to take on more responsibility." Sarah nodded, her expression proud. "I knew you'd be perfect for it." I'll start the paperwork, and we can go over the details later. But I have no doubt you'll do great. As Sarah left, Lisa felt a rush of excitement. This was a new chapter, one that she hadn't anticipated but was ready for nonetheless. She had come so far, and now she had another opportunity to grow, to prove to herself and to the world that she was more than just a maid, more than just someone working behind the scenes. She was capable. She was worthy. And as she prepared for her new role at the cafe, Lisa knew that her journey was far from over. It was just beginning. It had been a few weeks since Lisa started her new role at the cafe, and with each passing day, she felt herself becoming more confident. The job was a challenge, but it was a challenge she embraced wholeheartedly. The responsibilities had grown, and she was learning so much more than she had anticipated. Her mind had been sharp in school, but this was different. This was real-world experience, the kind that demanded quick thinking and the ability to juggle multiple tasks at once. Lisa was thriving. She had become an essential part of the cafe, her interactions with the customers more confident, her decisions more decisive. There were moments when the pressure would mount, when the weight of the job, her classes, and the balance of her new life seemed too much. But every time she felt overwhelmed, she remembered the message from John, the reminder that she was capable of more. She had come so far already, and she knew there was so much more ahead of her. One particular afternoon, as Lisa was taking a quick break between shifts, she received a call from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello," she said, her voice cautious. "Lisa Thompson?" A deep voice asked. "This is John Castellano." Her heart skipped a beat at the sound of his name. It had been months since she had heard from him, and though she hadn't expected to speak with him again, the mention of his name brought back a rush of memories, the encouragement, the belief he had shown in her when she didn't believe in herself. "Hi, John," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's been a while. I've been following your progress," he said, his tone calm but sincere. "I'm proud of you, Lisa. You've really taken control of your life." Lisa felt a surge of emotion at his words. It meant so much to her to hear his praise. She had worked so hard to get where she was, and to know that someone like John, who had been a pivotal part of her journey, saw her growth meant the world. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I wouldn't have been able to do this without your encouragement. You really helped me believe in myself." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "I'm glad to hear that," John said. "You're a testament to what can happen when someone chooses to believe in their own potential." Lisa smiled softly at his words. "I've learned a lot," she said, feeling a new sense of pride in her voice. "But I still have a long way to go." John's voice grew more serious. "You do," he agreed. "And that's exactly why I'm calling." Lisa furrowed her brow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I want to offer you a new opportunity," he said. "There's a position opening up in one of the businesses I'm involved with, and I think you're ready for it." Lisa's mind raced, a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling up inside her. A position in one of John's businesses? She had no idea what it would entail, but she could feel the weight of the opportunity. "I don't know what to say," she said, stunned. "Are you sure I'm ready?" John chuckled lightly. "I wouldn't offer it to you if I didn't think you were. You've already shown that you can handle responsibility, that you can thrive in a challenging environment. This could be a step forward for you." Lisa felt her pulse quicken. It was a big leap, one that could take her down a completely new path. But then, she remembered her promise to herself. She had come so far because she had stopped letting fear dictate her choices. This could be another step toward her future, toward the life she had always dreamed of. "What kind of position is it?" she asked, trying to gather her thoughts. "It's a management role," John explained. "It will involve overseeing operations, working with a team, and helping to expand one of the ventures I'm currently involved in. I believe you have the skill set for it." Lisa's mind raced as she processed the information. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had been looking for, an opportunity to use everything she had learned in school, at the cafe, and in life. It was a chance to grow, to take her future into her own hands. "I would love to," Lisa replied, her voice filled with a new sense of conviction. "I'll do it." "Good," John said. "I'll have the details sent to you. It's going to be a lot of hard work, but I believe you're ready." As Lisa ended the call, she sat for a moment, letting the weight of what had just happened sink in. It was everything she had worked for, everything she had hoped for. But it was also a reminder of how far she had come. She had not only built a new life for herself, but now, she was being given the opportunity to shape her future even more. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was a woman with ambition, a woman who had learned to believe in herself. And now, with this new opportunity, she was taking the next step. Lisa stood up, her heart racing with excitement. There was still much to do, still much to learn, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. She had faced the uncertainty, and she had chosen to keep moving forward. And as she looked out the window, watching the city continue to move around her, she knew that she was ready to take on whatever came next. The days following Lisa's decision to accept the new position were a whirlwind. She spent the next few weeks absorbing as much as she could, learning the ins and outs of the business, diving into operations with a focus that amazed even herself. The transition wasn't easy, but it was exhilarating. The role was demanding, requiring her to think on her feet, lead a small team, and manage a variety of tasks that tested her patience and skills. Yet, with each challenge she faced, she grew more confident, more comfortable in her new skin. She was no longer the woman who had entered the mansion, unsure of her worth, doubting her abilities. Now, she was someone who had stepped into her own power, embracing her capabilities with a boldness she had never known. As weeks passed, Lisa became a valued member of the team. Her ideas were listened to, her suggestions respected. For the first time in her life, she felt like her voice truly mattered. The shift from being a maid to a manager was more than just a change in job title. It was a transformation in how she viewed herself. She had always been the one in the background, never asking for recognition, always willing to fade into the shadows. Now, she was stepping into the spotlight, and it felt good. It was a Saturday afternoon when Lisa received another unexpected message, this time from John. She hadn't heard from him in a while, and his message brought a smile to her face. Asterisk, I hope everything is going well. I've been hearing great things about you, Lisa. Keep up the good work. You're doing amazing. Asterisk, Lisa's heart swelled at the words. John had been a mentor to her from the beginning, and knowing that he was proud of her, seeing her growth, was all the validation she needed. She quickly replied, Asterisk, thank you, John. I couldn't have done this without your support. It means the world to me. Asterisk, as she put her phone down, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She thought about how far she had come, from the mansion, from the shadows of her old life. She had taken control, made choices for herself, and now, she was living a life she had once only dreamed of. Her mind wandered back to her earlier days in the mansion. She had been scared, unsure of what would happen if she broke away from the life she knew. But John had believed in her. He had given her the push she needed to take that first step, to leave behind everything she had been taught to accept, and to step into a world of possibilities. Lisa's thoughts were interrupted when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a reminder about an upcoming business meeting. Her heart raced slightly at the thought of the presentation she would be leading in just a few days. It was the first time she had been given the responsibility of presenting to a group of higher-ups, and the pressure was mounting. She knew she was capable, but self-doubt still had a way of sneaking in at the worst times. You've got this, she muttered to herself as she looked over her notes. She had worked hard to prepare, and now it was time to deliver. The days leading up to the meeting were filled with intense preparation. Lisa stayed up late reviewing the materials, practicing her presentation, and ensuring every detail was accounted for. She wanted to prove not just to others, but to herself that she was ready for this. She had spent so many years being overlooked, but now, she had the chance to show everyone just how much she had to offer. The day of the meeting arrived, and Lisa stood in front of a large conference table, facing a room full of executives. Her heart raced, but she didn't let the nerves show. She took a deep breath and began speaking, her voice steady and clear. As she walked through her presentation, she felt a sense of calm take over her. This was her moment. This was the moment she had been working toward. The meeting went smoothly, and by the end, Lisa felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had done it. She had faced her fear and had come out on top. As she left the meeting room, the executive team praised her for her thoroughness and her clear presentation. She felt a surge of pride in that moment, a feeling that only grew stronger when John sent her another message. Asterisk, I heard about the meeting. You did great, Lisa. Keep going. You're unstoppable. Asterisk, the words were simple, but they meant everything to her. John had always seen something in her, and now, she was beginning to see it in herself. As the weeks went by, Lisa's confidence continued to grow. The business was thriving under her leadership, and the team she managed was beginning to gel, working together smoothly and efficiently. Lisa had become more than just a part of the team. She was its backbone. She was the one people turned to for advice, for direction. And with each challenge that came her way, she faced it head-on, knowing she had the skills to overcome anything. One evening, after a long day of work, Lisa sat in her apartment, reflecting on how far she had come. The quiet of the evening was a stark contrast to the busy energy of her workdays, and in that stillness, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her journey. She had made it. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She had built a life for herself, one that was full of possibilities, full of hope. And for the first time, she knew that nothing could stand in her way. It had been several months since Lisa had stepped into the new role that had completely transformed her life. She had settled into the rhythm of her work, balancing her responsibilities at the cafe and the growing demands of her management position. Every day brought new challenges, but with each one, Lisa felt more in control, more confident in her abilities. The self-doubt that had once held her back seemed like a distant memory. It was a Saturday afternoon when she received an unexpected call. She had just finished her shift and was sitting in the break room, sipping on a cup of coffee, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told her she should answer. "Hello," she said, her voice calm yet curious. "Lisa, it's John Castellano." Her heart skipped a beat at the sound of his voice. It had been a while since they had spoken, and hearing from him again stirred something inside her. "John, it's good to hear from you," she replied, a smile tugging at her lips. "I hope everything is going well." "It is," John said. "I've been keeping up with your progress. I'm really proud of how far you've come, Lisa. You've done more than just adapt, you've excelled." Lisa felt a warm rush of pride at his words. She hadn't expected to hear such praise, especially from someone like John, who had been a pivotal part of her journey. "Thank you," she said softly, feeling the weight of his approval. "It's been a lot of hard work, but I'm finally starting to feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be." "I can tell," John said. There was a brief pause on the other end, and Lisa could hear the hint of something more in his voice. "And that's why I'm calling." Lisa's heart fluttered with anticipation. What was this about? "What's going on?" she asked her. Curiosity piqued. "I have another opportunity for you," John said. "It's not something I take lightly, but I think you're ready. There's a new venture I'm starting, and I'd like you to be part of it." Lisa was silent for a moment, processing his words. A new venture? She had come so far from the woman who had once been overwhelmed by uncertainty, and now, here was John offering her another opportunity to grow. "Tell me more," she said, her voice steady. "I'm starting a new project, something that's going to require someone with your skills." "It's a leadership role," John continued. "It's bigger than anything you've done before, but I believe you're ready for it. You've proven yourself time and time again." Lisa felt her pulse quicken at the idea of taking on something bigger. It was a chance to continue growing, to expand her horizons even further. "I would be honored," she said, her voice firm with determination. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," John said, his voice filled with confidence. "I'll send over the details, but I wanted you to know that this is your chance to really step into something significant. You've earned it." Lisa felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. It was more than just the opportunity that mattered. It was the belief John had in her, the faith he had shown her from the very beginning. "Thank you, John," she said quietly. "I'm ready for this." As they ended the call, Lisa sat back in her chair, her mind racing with the possibilities. She had been given another chance, another opportunity to build something new, to step further into the life she had worked so hard to create. The future was still uncertain, but now, with this new venture ahead of her, she felt more certain than ever that she was on the right path. The next few days were filled with excitement and anticipation. Lisa spent time reviewing the details of the new project, preparing herself for the responsibilities that would come with it. She wasn't just going to take this opportunity, she was going to seize it with both hands. She had come so far, and this was the next step in her journey. The following week, Lisa attended a meeting where she would be introduced to the new team she would be working with. As she walked into the conference room, she was greeted by a group of professionals, all of whom looked eager to get started. There was a sense of purpose in the room, a shared excitement about what was to come. Lisa took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This was her chance to lead, to take on a role she had once thought was out of reach. As the meeting progressed, Lisa found herself speaking up more than she had anticipated. She contributed ideas, shared her vision, and helped shape the direction of the project. She was no longer the unsure woman who had walked into the mansion years ago. She was a leader, someone who had earned the respect of her peers. By the end of the meeting, Lisa felt a deep sense of pride in herself. She had done it. She had stepped into a new chapter, one that was filled with promise and opportunity. The road ahead would not be easy, but Lisa knew she was ready for whatever came her way. She had built this life from the ground up, and now, with this new venture, she was ready to take it even further. As she left the meeting, her heart swelled with gratitude for the people who had supported her along the way. John, the friends she had made, and most importantly, herself. She had come so far, and the best part was, she knew this was only the beginning.